te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere nei, a second person with COVID has died while isolating at home. Taranaki testing stations are in overdrive after a wastewater positive in Stratford. The Auckland border debates pushing some people's patience and livelihoods to the brink. The Deputy Mayor is live and is achieving the government's 90% double vax target on par with lassoing a unicorn. The rain's eased in Gisborne, but the risk of slips is still a biggie. It's revealed the man accused of snatching Chloe was obsessed with dolls and Disney princesses. When sweet cookies go sour, the sugar scare that sent businesses crumbling. And will the meerkats recognise us with our masks on? Hamilton Zoo's open.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Kia ora, I'm Marama Tipole. An expert says more deaths in the community from COVID-19 are inevitable now the virus is now established in Auckland and poised to spread throughout the country. A man in his 50s was found dead at a Mount Eden home today, the second death in 2 days after a man in his 40s died while also self-isolating at home. Epidemiologist Rod Jackson from Auckland University says with 800 known cases now isolating in the community and likely many more undetected, there will be more deaths.
Once we loosen up more, and there's a huge pressure to loosen up, we're going to have it spread throughout the country. We're going to see more cases, and we're going to see more severe cases among the unvaccinated, which is why New Zealand needs to get their vaccination rate so high.
Professor Jackson says it is not possible for health authorities to have close clinical oversight of so many cases in the community. The government says people travelling through the Taranaki region might explain why a wastewater sample has tested positive for COVID-19. The virus has been detected in wastewater taken from Stratford on Monday. The Deputy Prime Minister, Grant Robertson, says this could be explained by people visiting Taranaki.
One thing I would note is that there are people travelling through Taranaki. There's been a number of events in the area in Stratford that people, where the wastewater results been, where people have come from elsewhere in New Zealand. So there's a number of potential explanations.
Grant Robertson says while there's no evidence of community cases in Taranaki, it's important anyone with symptoms gets tested. The new daily cases of COVID-19 hit an all-time high today with 163 community cases, 4 are in Waikato, King Country and the rest in Auckland. The state of emergency in Tairāwhiti has this afternoon been lifted after 3 days of torrential rain. Civil Defence Controller Dave Wilson says despite this, the saturated ground means landslides remain an ongoing risk. Homes in Hill Road have been evacuated and engineers continue to watch the situation. Mr Wilson says civil defence crews will continue monitoring the region over the weekend. He warns people who live on hillsides and riverbanks should check for signs of subsidence. A Gisborne resident says she returned home yesterday to see massive amounts of mud and silt covering her entire backyard. Katie Fitzpatrick lives at the bottom of a steep cliff in a central suburb. She says the ground below her kids' grassy playground was ruined in torrential rain.
We just casually went, as Kiwis do, for a drive to admire all the water around the place and a pie. Came home to eat our pie and get some more wood for the fire, and looked out the back door and there's the neighbour's property in our backyard.
Katie Fitzpatrick says it's now about cleaning up and figuring out how to get rid of the silt. Gisborne Mayor Riet Stoltz and local MP Kiri Allen, who's also the Emergency Management Minister, visited the Fitzpatrick's home today and other homes in the area to take stock of the damage. A Dunedin man has been sentenced to life imprisonment for murdering a couple, then setting their home on fire. Willie Nomana was jailed for the murders of Anastasia Neve and David Clark and the arson of their South Dunedin home. Nomana, aged 50, was trying to source drugs when he killed the pair in 2018. He will not be eligible for release until 2035. The deaths of 11 fur seals in Kaikoura are being treated as suspicious. Department of Conservation, Te Rūranga o Kaikoura and police are investigating the deaths of the seals at Oahu Point Fur Seal Sanctuary and Half Moon Bay. Phil Bradfield of DOC says early indications point to a deliberate killing. The penalty for killing a seal is up to 2 years in jail or a maximum fine of $250,000. It's 5:04. The All Blacks coach Ian Foster concedes he's not sure what to expect from Italy under the new coach, former All Black Kieran Crowley. The two teams meet in Rome on Sunday. Italy went winless in the Six Nations, while Crowley only got the squad together for the first time last week.
I don't know. I think in many ways, Kieran probably hasn't had a lot of time to put his mark on the team. Be interesting to see whether they play a little bit more through their traditional methods of their forwards and try to bring that part of their game back stronger, or whether they try to play a really open game. So we're guessing a little bit.
Sam Cane returns to captain the All Blacks. Winning, not the run rate, is the Black Caps' priority for their last two group games at cricket's T20 World Cup. The New Zealanders play Namibia tonight and Afghanistan on Sunday night, with 2 wins guaranteeing a semi-final berth. A loss could see the calculators out to decide who goes through, but all-rounder Mitchell Santner says they don't want to get that close.
Especially at a ground like Sharjah, if you're trying to win by a lot, it can be quite challenging, just with the way the surface is. So I think we just got to look first at just playing our best cricket at Sharjah and beating Namibia, and then moving on from there and then seeing what Abu Dhabi has for us against Afghanistan. But it's in our control. If we win 2 games, we're through.
The match starts at 11 p.m. Meanwhile, Australia have confirmed the postponement of their maiden cricket test against Afghanistan in Hobart later this month. Cricket Australia has concerns over the status of women's cricket in the country following the Taliban takeover and are postponing the test until the situation in Afghanistan becomes clearer. That's the news.
Tomorrow morning, patron saint of leakers Daniel Ellsberg, 50 years since he released the Pentagon Papers. Now he's championing Julian Assange. Art historian Louis Beringer on the fraught reputation of Theo Schoon. Renee on reading, and Fran Lebowitz, cantankerous and beloved by a new generation, thanks to another documentary by Martin Scorsese. Call Kim Hillaho. Join me tomorrow morning from 8 on RNZ National.
And now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Saturday for the northern half of the North Island, from Taumaranui and Taupo northwards, including Bay of Plenty. Cloudy periods and scattered showers, thunderstorms and heavy downpours for some areas during the afternoon and evening, both today and tomorrow, with a chance of hail for Northland today. For Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, periods of rain with possible heavy falls in Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, easing tomorrow evening. Taranaki and Taihape to Wellington, also Marlborough, often cloudy, a few showers mainly in the south and east. For Nelson, cloudy periods, isolated showers mainly inland in the afternoons and evenings. Canterbury, Otago and Southland, also Bulla, Westland and Fiordland. Fine apart from areas of morning and evening cloud, however cloud more persistent in North Canterbury with isolated showers there. And for the Chatham Islands, expect cloudy weather. It's 5:07.
Nā mihi marama, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki checkpointi tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Further questions are being raised about home self-isolation for COVID cases after the death of a second person. The Auckland man in his 50s was found dead at an address in Mount Eden after an ambulance was called. It comes 2 days after a man in his 40s also died while self-isolating at home. It says case numbers climbed by a record 163 today, with 159 in Auckland and 4 in the Waikato. Andrew McRae reports.
As the current outbreak grows by triple figures each day, more and more people are self-isolating at home. There are nearly 800 people we know of isolating at home, but there could be over another 1,200 active cases doing the same. At this afternoon's 1 o'clock COVID briefing, Deputy Prime Minister Grant Robertson was able to shed a little light on events surrounding the latest death.
My understanding is this particular person was admitted to hospital on the 1st of November and they discharged themselves from hospital on the 3rd, that was Wednesday of this week, and that there was phone contact with them on both the 3rd and the 4th of November. And then, as Dr. McElnay has indicated, there was an ambulance called this morning on the 5th.
He still has confidence in the new system around self-isolating.
We have to continually monitor it, and that's happening between the Ministry of Health and Auckland Regional Public Health. They're looking at both these specific incidents, but also at the wider system.
Mr Robertson says 2 assessments are carried out before a person is given the okay to self-isolate.
The first of those assessments is a public health assessment, and that is an assessment about issues like the suitability of the circumstances where someone is living. Is it a place where they can easily self-isolate? Can they support and look after themselves in that environment? And then the second assessment is a medical assessment.
He warns that people shouldn't jump to conclusions about the cause of death as inquiries are still underway. Public Health Director Caroline McElnay says improvements in monitoring people self-isolating are being made all the time.
It's very sad, these particular situations, and we will learn from any findings for those 2 situations, but also with all the others who are being managed at home, that feedback that we get, that the health authorities in Auckland get, and how to make sure that we're providing the best care.
Dr Andrew Stapleton from the Australia-New Zealand Intensive Care Society says for most with COVID-19, a rapid decline is unlikely, but it can be nasty for some.
Up to 25% of patients with a bad case of COVID can get blood clots, and so they can dislodge from where they form in your legs and go to your lungs, and that can lead to a sudden deterioration. And the other nasty side effect of COVID is the way it affects your heart and gives you inflammation of the heart. And certainly of the patients sick enough to be in hospital, some of those patients have had their heart stopped. They've had a cardiac arrest, and that has come somewhat out of the blue.
University of Auckland epidemiologist Rod Jackson says more deaths from COVID in the community are inevitable, as overseas experience shows, such as an island which has a similar population to New Zealand.
5,000 deaths so far. They're having 8 a day at the moment, and they're not all old people with, other conditions. This is really sad, but COVID's a nasty disease, and without vaccination, I'm assuming neither of these people are vaccinated, although I don't know, we're going to see deaths.
The 2 deaths in self-isolation are being reviewed by health authorities and will be investigated by the coroner.
A positive wastewater test in Taranaki has people fearing COVID's spread far beyond the Auckland border. An ESR sample from Stratford, taken on Monday, has returned a strong positive result, with authorities informed last night. But there was no official announcement until this morning, and that's got iwi in the region questioning why it took so long to alert the community. Our Taranaki Wanganui reporter Robin Martin has been in Stratford.
First word of the strong positive test in the water came via Ngāti Ruanui at about 9 a.m. Half an hour later, its healthcare arm had set up a mobile Vax and Yak clinic at the Stratford railway station. The Taranaki District Health Board officially confirmed the positive test result just after 10 a.m. Te Pātai Māori co-leader Debbie Ngariwa-Paka, who donned PPE to help deliver jabs and take tests, says that's not good enough.
There were literally 12 hours between us known and the rest of Stratford known, and that's not good enough. People carry on and go to school and go to work when they perhaps should have been doing some testing.
The Taranaki Medical Officer of Health, Dr Jonathan Jarman, told Midday the District Health Board followed the national process and had waited for the Ministry of Health to make an announcement.
There's internal communication and there's external communication through the news media. The internal communication has been happening since last night.
Back on the ground in Stratford, Debbie Ngariwa-Paka, who is also a Ngāti Ruanui leader, says people are scared.
Yeah, they're absolutely frightened. They're frightened. They feel the community's been too lax. They feel there hasn't been enough protections. They've been worried about the Moko border. There's been a lot of traffic coming through the back way. So I guess there's been an overwhelming sense of hopelessness that they haven't got control over things, but also a general sense of we've been a bit complacent via.
Across at the War Memorial Centre car park, registered nurse and business manager Warren Nichols is setting up Ngāruahini's Hauora pop-up testing station. Mr Nichols says the wastewater result is concerning.
For us, it's alarming. Been a strong result. Obviously, that's indicative of potentially some positive cases within our community. We want to make sure we are responding immediately to understand that better. It's only by testing that we will get a much clearer picture of how widespread that might be, if at all.
He's worried about local Māori in particular.
Stratford Whakaurangi has got the lowest Māori vaccination rate across Taranaki, and as much as that rate is still not high enough, we're still only at 70% first dose, and we're still below 45% for a second dose. So we're really conscious that our whānau are in the most at-risk group.
Stratford Mayor Neil Volsky has also been on the ground encouraging people to get tested.
A very strong possibility that it's a community spread, and in order to contain that, we need to make sure that we do the testing, try and locate the source, because at the moment it's possible that there are people in the community with COVID who don't realise they're spreading it.
And Stratford residents have been heeding the call.
I just come down just to get the test done because of the water waste COVID result.
My daughter had some cold symptoms for maybe 2 days, so I thought it'd be best to come down and check just to make sure.
I just woke up with a sore throat.
No, better come and get tested just in case. Only because I've got a bit of a runny nose.
I saw the sign and the walk-ins and thought, why not get my second one?
Doing testing because I'm working in the restroom.
As well as the iwi-led clinics, which plan to stay open over the weekend, testing and vaccinations are being offered at the Avon Medical Centre, and the Stratford Pharmacy and Mackay's Unicam Pharmacy are offering vaccinations.
It's 5:15 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Kia ora watu mo te whakarongo mai. Haere nei, Auckland's Deputy Mayor on the border debate. As Auckland reaches day 80 in lockdown, some say they're desperate to see restrictions loosened for the double vaccinated. But not everyone's on the same page, with some experts and residents saying it's too soon to let people go to parties, dine out and mingle with family. Nick Trubridge and cameraman Nick Monroe hit the streets to ask residents, business owners and health experts, how much longer should people be given to get vaccinated before opening up?
I'm Tom, I'm a teacher, and I just think people who are double vaccinated already, I think they should be given the option to leave Auckland. So yeah, if they're double vaxxed, I think they should get a negative test a couple of days beforehand and then they should be free to leave. That's what I think.
Kia ora, my name's Isaiah Rehana Thompson. I go to Western Springs College, Ngā Puna o Waiorea. I'm in the bilingual unit. I think that it wouldn't hurt to wait a little longer for us to get vaccinated, because it's a bit of a worry for a lot of Māori and young rangatahi like me. It's good to see people are getting vaccinated, and whether you're for or against it, it's all right.
Hi, I'm Michelle McKenzie. I have 2 children, and I think it's time that we should be opening up now. Vaccination rates are high for double vaccination rates in Auckland. It's time to open.
My name's Todd Mail. I'm a businessman, retailer here in Newmarket in Auckland. Been here for 31 years. I firmly believe the time is now to open Auckland back up, to ease the restrictions, get retail going, get hospitality going. We have endured enough. The people of Auckland have put up with enough. The rest of the country is waiting on some energy. The energy will come from Auckland. With all due respect, the time is now to ease restrictions.
Hi, I'm Helen Patousas-Harris. I'm a vaccinologist at the University of Auckland and, of course, been following all of this COVID business for quite some time. And in terms of opening up, I can't wait. And what do we need to see before we do this? I need, obviously, lots of people vaccinated. I think we're nearly there. It all depends what we're trying to stop. And if we're trying to make sure we don't overwhelm our hospitals, then, you know, we need to get over that 90% double vaxxed. And always more is better, because the more people vaccinated, the less people we're going to have getting really sick and dying.
Mark Knopf-Thomas, Chief Executive of the Newmarket Business Association.
I think with ongoing concerted efforts to really drive the vaccination message across Auckland and around the rest of the country, Auckland should be looking to open up as soon as possible. If our businesses can do so safely, following COVID protocols with mask use, social distancing, etc., I believe we can open up our businesses now, retail and hospitality and personal services like barbers, in a safe way, and we should be able to do that as soon as possible.
I'm Rod Jackson. I'm an epidemiologist at the University of Auckland, and what I would like to know before I could recommend that we open up is more about the last 10%. We're pretty much at 90%, but what's going to determine the impact on the health sector, on the individuals involved, is who exactly they are. Where do they live? What are their ages? What's their ethnicity? What level of deprivation they have? How many live in a household? Those are the factors that are going to make all the difference as to how many end up in hospital, how many end up in ICU, how many die.
Well, joining me now is the Deputy Mayor of Auckland, Bill Cashmore. Kia ora, Bill.
Kia ora, Lisa. How are you?
I'm well. How would you feel about there still being a hard border around Auckland come summer?
I don't think I'd be that keen about that, but they always say the darkest part of the night is just before the dawn. I can sense there's a dawn coming. It's not quite deeply sure when.
Okay, so do you have some inside information which gives you complete confidence the border will be gone and there'll be free travel for Aucklanders?
No, I don't have any information like that, Lisa, but you'd have to think, though, we are at 90% or very, very close to it. We don't know who the people are who aren't vaccinated. I just listened to your previous speaker.
Yep.
But there's always going to be a number that don't want to be vaccinated. That's their, and that's cool. That's their choice. But we can't be held to ransom either. But most importantly, we don't want to overrun our hospitals and emergency services. So let's get those numbers as close to as being accurate as we can, bearing in mind there will be a plus or minus margin of error. But I want to see Auckland businesses, I want to see the entertainment going. I really need a haircut. And I'd like to go out to a nice dinner in town.
So do you...
else, right? Just like everyone else.
Do you support the 90% double vaxxed target?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty sensible move if it's possible to get there. I think we're going to, like I say, it's going to be a margin of error plus or minus a bit there. So if we don't quite get there, let's go. We've got to go fairly soon.
What's fairly soon, Bill?
I would like to see that by December, we're away.
And what is away? No border at all and free travel, or what, Bill?
Yeah, level 1.
Level 1 by the 1st of December?
Yep.
And how realistic do you think that is?
I'm giving it a good 50% plus chance.
What conversations are you having with the government and government agencies?
None whatsoever. No more than what anyone else does. We have a weekly call with the Ministry of Health and their officials, but the information they've got is tell us is in the media virtually straight afterwards. So I don't have any privileged information at all. Neither do any other councillors, to my knowledge.
So level 1 by the 1st of December, and that would be regardless of what we have reached in terms of double vaccination levels, Bill?
Yeah, I think because everyone's had a chance, right? You've given as many people a chance as possible to get their vaccine. If someone's going to decide not to do it, you could wait till hell freezes over. They still won't get it done. So that's their choice. That's fine. We can't be held up waiting for everybody.
And do we not have a responsibility to keep them safe?
They've taken a personal choice. You'd have to be living under a pretty big rock not to understand the risks and your responsibilities with this endemic.
So for Auckland, as you've pointed out, we're doing all right with our vaccination rates tracking upwards, right? But neighbouring regions, some of them are not doing so well. So head north, not great in terms of their double vaccination rates. So when you talk about opening the border up, what do you understand the situation would be if Aucklanders reach 90% vaccinated, double vaccinated? Will Aucklanders be free to travel wherever they want to?
I think I wouldn't know how you'd stop it. Would be the challenge, wouldn't it? But there'd have to be some common sense rules around. Wear a mask, sanitise. Don't be so close, but just do the things that are right. And that's what's happening all over the world at the moment. Interesting articles from a prominent New Zealander who's in LA at the moment saying, well, you know, LA's open, but people have been sensible in how they carry on. So, yeah. I think there's a degree of inevitability around this, that we are locked down out, and everyone's sick of it, and it's time to move forward. We've just got to do that at the right time when it is as safe as is practically possible.
So, Bill, you would talk to a few people on the Zoom and the phone, you know, stuck at home and the like. What are people saying to you about what to expect if there's still a border around Auckland? How are they going to take that?
Well, I don't think, no one's actually spoke to me about there being a border. I don't think anyone else spoken to sees that as a realistic opportunity. I just don't see it as a reality.
Have you had many conversations with the Mayor about this? Because he's been a bit quiet on it.
Yeah, so I've had yes and no. So the Mayor's got his own views.
Are they different to yours, Bill? And how so?
They might be slightly. He might be a little bit more conservative, perhaps. I just think that business has suffered long enough and the public have suffered long enough. And the art of politics is governing with the consent of the people.
So you're at odds? You're at odds with the Mayor?
Oh, no, I wouldn't say that. No, not at all, Lisa. You know, the Mayor and I get on very, very well. We have our differences of opinion, but it's often at the margins. And I'm not saying we're at odds, no.
Okay, so you reckon he sees it differently to you, though? Have you both had have you had a conversation with him and asked him whether he supports the border remaining?
Yeah, so we've discussed this, and we've discussed the realities around it, Lisa. And, you know, the Mayor's a very sensible man, and he knows that the Aucklanders, just like I'm saying, they're fed up, and it's the first topic of their conversation, is they're here or they're dying to go out to have a nice meal somewhere with their wife and family. But he also understands, like I do, the reality of you know, what could happen if things go drastically wrong. And my point is that at some stage we're going to have to take that step, and it's going to be a bit of a leap of faith. And the Mayor might be slightly more conservative than I am about when he wants to take that step and leap of faith.
Really appreciate your time, Bill. Thanks for joining us. That's Bill Cashmore, who's the Deputy Mayor of Auckland. Homai o Whakaaro would love your feedback on this one. How long do we wait for people to get vaccinated? Nō reira anei na kaupapa mo te hōtaka nei, and also Bill Cashmore saying there that he reckons 1st of December, level 1 for Auckland, regardless of the vaccination rates, because everyone's had a good chance, reckons Bill. What do you think? Pātui mai. Text me 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It's 26 minutes past 5. Kia mau tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. The heavy rain may have subsided and the state of emergency has been lifted in Gisborne, but authorities say landslides and slips are causing a second wave of problems. Torrential downpours saturated the city yesterday, and the forecast predicts it won't be letting up just yet. Our Taira Whiti reporter Tom Kitchen has more.
Wading through thick, deep, mucky, dirty silt. That's what many Taranaki residents are doing today as a clean-up from the intense rain begins. One of them is Katie Fitzpatrick.
We just casually went, as Kiwis do, for a drive to admire all the water around the place and a pie. Came home to eat our pie and get some more wood for the fire, and looked out the back door and there's the neighbour's property in our backyard.
She lives at the bottom of a steep cliff face, and most of it fell on her property yesterday.
Word's not good for radio, insert here. Bummer. Yeah, bummer was a good one. Didn't really know what to do, to be honest. There was quite a lot of water and a lot of mud.
On first inspection, her house didn't seem too bad, but the same can't be said for her section.
To be honest, it's a lot of mud. Like, it's a lot of mud. I don't even know what to do with that much mud.
Local leaders, including Gisborne's Mayor Riet Stoltz, visited houses like Katie's today to understand the problems firsthand.
Some are just water damage, but others, like this one, there's a mudslide that came around the house. There's been some homes that have had clear disturbance where it's not safe to stay there.
Emergency Management Minister Kiri Allen, who's also the local MP, was there too.
Now the focus is really on assessing the impact. It's making sure that people are connected to the services that they need to be connected to, and if not, working out who the right people are to be the connectors.
Nearby, a large slip has blocked off access for about 20 homes on Hill Road. It was full of native trees and retaining walls. Shona Egan lives by the slip. She wanted to transform the hill.
We just wanted to get rid of the noxious weeds and honeysuckle, some wild honeysuckle there, and we thought we'd try and put it back into native.
But now she doesn't know what's next.
Well, it's going to be a very different kettle of fish now. The whole profile of the hill has changed.
Down the road, brothers Ollie and Isaac Robinson are going on their boogie boards through the rainwater because the school's shut due to flood damage. Isaac tells me what he's up to.
Surfing and stuff, practising.
Practising for the waves, eh?
Yeah.
Ollie's having fun too.
Is this better than school?
Yep.
Why is that?
Because you don't have to do anything.
So the rain is eased for now. Just a few drops, if any, are falling from the sky, but cloud is still hanging over the city. I'm standing in the city centre, admiring what would normally be a sunny spring Taranaki view. Today, that's just not the case. And what's next? Well, that's anyone's guess. Rain is still forecast over the weekend. A heavy rain watch is in place until 6 a.m. tomorrow. Residents are advised to prepare and take careful note of any damage.
Well, Bill Cashmore, Deputy Mayor of Auckland, has, sparked a debate, really. He reckons Auckland should be open on the 1st of December, level 1 he'd like to go to. Bill is living under a pretty big rock, just to quote Bill, says this listener. Another person says, Bill Cashmore's on the money. Auckland has done its fair share. If you're not vaccinated now, you've had your chance. Let's go, Auckland. Another one in the same vein, definitely open the Auckland border, 1st of December at the latest. But on the other side of the coin, I reckon Deputy Mayor Bill is dreaming if he thinks Auckland will be at level 1 by December. Do keep your feedback coming. E te iwi e haere nei e a checkpoint, the contaminated sugar scare leaving a sour taste for one cookie maker. We cross live to Stratford for more on the COVID-positive wastewater and what it means. And did the animals miss their human friends during lockdown? Hamilton Zoo opens for the first time since restrictions loosened. Love to hear from you. Homai o whakaaro. Send us your feedback on anything you've heard on the programme this evening. Text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time now for the headlines. Ko marama anō tēnei.
Thank you, Lisa. Epidemiologist Rod Jackson says more deaths in the community from COVID-19 are inevitable now the virus is now established in Auckland and poised to spread throughout the country. A man in his 50s was found dead at a Mount Eden home today, the second death in 2 days after a man in his 40s died while also self-isolating at home. The Director of Public Health, Dr Caroline McElnay, says home isolation will be reviewed. The government says people travelling through the Taranaki region might explain why a wastewater sample has tested positive for COVID-19. The virus has been detected in wastewater taken from Stratford on Monday. The Deputy Prime Minister says the commitment to allow Aucklanders to travel over the summer remains, but depends on making the logistics work. Grant Robertson says the plan was to have all 3 Auckland DHBs at a 90% vaccination rate, but the government must look at a plan B if this target isn't met. $5.3 billion has been paid out to businesses via the wage subsidy and the resurgent support payment so far this outbreak. Mr Robertson says almost 1 million applications for the wage subsidy have been approved. The state of emergency in Tairāwhiti has this afternoon been lifted after 3 days of torrential rain. Civil Defence Controller Dave Wilson says despite this, the saturated ground means landslides remain an ongoing risk. A Dunedin man has been sentenced to life imprisonment for murdering a couple, then setting their home on fire. Willie Nomana was jailed for the murders of Anastasia Neve and David Clark and the arson of their South Dunedin home. Nomana, aged 50, was trying to source drugs when he killed the pair in 2018. And the deaths of 11 fur seals in Kaikoura are being treated as suspicious. Department of Conservation, Te Runanga o Kaikoura, and police are investigating the deaths of the seals at Oho Point Fur Seal Sanctuary and Half Moon Bay. Those are the headlines. Our next news and sport update is at 6.
Kia ora rā e hono mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Ko taku hoa e nai ko Nona Peltier, who's standing by to talk business. Okay, Nona, KiwiSaver funds have been steady but subdued over the third quarter. That sounds like the Goldilocks analysis. Not too hot, not too cold. What was the growth rate there?
Well, it was only about 1% on average, and that's across the different, all sorts of funds. And part of the reason was, basically portfolios that had a larger exposure to domestic growth assets and fixed interest and so on did better than those with exposure to international global funds. And that's because there was a shift from August and early September, and then a drop in gains as some economic momentum slowed in the United States and China. That had an effect on those global funds, whereas in New Zealand, the likes of Main Freight and Ryman Healthcare had helped the NZX Top 50 Index gain 4.9% over the quarter. And that compares, say, to Australia, which, had been subjected to extended lockdowns at growth of 1.7%. So really, the local market did really well, relatively speaking. But overall, the exposure did affect KiwiSavers. And remembering, of course, that this is long-term saving. So what happens in one quarter doesn't really make a great big deal of difference.
The technology sector is expected to see more mergers and takeovers over the coming year. What's the reason for that?
Well, we have this report called the TIN 200, and that's basically the Technology Investment Network. Every year they look at the top 200 tech companies. And what they have found is that the biggest and the smallest tech firms have done better than those in the middle of the pack. And the main reason for that is that the small New Zealand tech companies, they're pretty nimble, so that they've been able to take advantage of that, whereas the big ones have already got well-positioned globally. So, for example, Xero, they've got staff in their major international markets, and you can say the same for, say, Fisher and Paykel. So they were less affected. But those in the middle had a harder time with the supply chain. Disruptions there caused some issues. And then the sales force, based in New Zealand, trying to do deals over Zoom, it just didn't have the same effect. So their growth rate actually dropped over the year, whereas the larger firms did really well. Overall, the industry gained 14%. That was $1.4 billion more in revenue to $14 billion. And the exporters broke a record at $10.5 billion worth of exports, also a 14% increase there. So overall, that means that those medium-sized businesses are more likely to sort of need investment. They're going to be perhaps looking to merge with larger players, and that means that there's probably going to be more activity. Luckily, there's a lot of investment dollars floating around, which hopefully means that they don't go out of business.
And Nona, let's take a Friday spin around the numbers.
Well, let's do that then. So our market did really well, closed up 1% today, a 131-point gain to 13,075. And the New Zealand dollar, it's trading at 71 US cents, 95.9 Australian, 52.6 pence.
Thanks, Nona. Ka kite, Nona Peltier there with business. The 90% double vax target set by the government has turned more than a few people into amateur statisticians, counting every jab, daily averages, downward trends and overdue second shots. And while some DHB regions are close to the Holy Grail, others are way off. Double doses in Tairāwhiti are at 65%, 69% in Taranaki, 67% in Taitokoro, and in the Lakes District, 68% are double dosed. So is the government's vaccination target the equivalent of trying to lasso a unicorn? Dr. Nikki Turner, Director of the Immunisation Advisory Centre, says gaining extra percentage points is getting harder and taking longer, but it's worth it.
The people who are supportive and wanted to be vaccinated have come forward and got vaccinated. Now you're getting into a much harder group and you expect much lower rates of uptake. So any gain at this point is a gain, and we're not expecting to suddenly get big numbers. You know, New Zealand's already worked really hard at getting first dose vaccination. So we're really now into the group that requires a huge amount of extra resourcing and legwork to get any further at all.
So, would you describe those people as resistant?
No, they're not resistant. There's a whole range of issues as to why this group of people are not getting vaccinated. Many of them are scared. Some of them still may have access issues despite the huge amounts of effort our services are putting in. Some of them have just got misinformation and they're hearing the echo chamber and getting really anxious. And there is always a small percentage in the population, New Zealand's always had it, that do not support the Ministry of Health, the National Science approach, general science. They will always be with us. So this is a mixed group of people still. They're not all the same.
In terms of second doses, there are a few people who are past the point where they should have come back for their second dose. They're clearly not anti the whole situation, or they wouldn't have had the first dose. So how do we get them back in for the second one?
Yeah, there's a range of reasons why people might not have had their second dose just 3 weeks after the first. Younger people in particular, if they've had a vigorous reaction to the first dose, it's fine to delay for more like up to 6 weeks for the second dose, because they will actually have very good protection from the first dose and they can afford a few more weeks gap. So some people might have had quite a vigorous reaction the first time and just want a bit more time before they come into the second. There will be a few people that may have had a bad experience, have not enjoyed it and are nervous about coming back for the second. That will be a small percentage, but they will be in there as well.
So are you basically telling us it's a waiting game and we've got to be patient? Because if we look at areas like Northland and Tairāwhiti, their numbers are low. And so time-wise, when we're told that double vaccination of 90% is the goal for freedom and people want freedom, how long do we have to wait?
So what I'm saying from a clinical point of view is New Zealand is doing incredibly well. We gave ourselves a really high target at 90%. We are doing better than most other countries in the world, and that is what is going to make a difference to our country when COVID spreads through our community. So any more percentage we can get at this point in any part of the country is worth going for. We've always had a mixed bag around the country with different reasons for different communities why they're slow to uptake. What we need to do now is put all the resources we can into those communities where their coverage is lower. Support the communities, support the health services. They've got a range of reasons why they're behind. There's no point at yelling at them and polarising them. What we recognise is that communities are different and they need local support.
You say every gain is a positive, right? But at what point is it diminishing returns in terms of the sacrifices people are making to their freedoms in order to gain maybe 1 or 2%?
Well, that's a political question, not a science question. From our perspective, any extra gain in coverage will reduce the effect on serious disease in our health services. So really, it's a political question when the country decides to open up more, not a health question.
You would have looked at a lot of vaccination campaigns, right? And you would see patterns. So has the government set the target too high here? Is 90%, unachievable?
I think 90% was incredibly high aspirationally, and I am astounded and thrilled at how close New Zealand is to getting 90%. We have achieved that for first dose in many areas, and we're not far off in others. So this was aspirational, and we're getting close to it. So I'm very impressed. Very few countries in the world managed to get anything like that for an adult vaccination campaign.
We're getting close to it as a country, Nikki, but not when you look at those individual DHBs, right? So they're almost two different goals. We can achieve 90% of eligible population, but that's not necessarily 90% at every DHB level. So if we look at that, which is the measure the government is using across each DHB, how realistic is that goal in your experience?
Well, countries are always left with what we'd say is equity gaps, where you get lower coverage in some areas as others. To do so and leave it in a large way means that we'll have large pockets of people where the disease can spread. So we may not be able to fully close the equity gap, but it's still worth putting in the extra legwork for the next few weeks to try and close it as much as we can, because everybody is going to suffer. If we have large communities that are still more at risk than others, that does leave everybody at risk. So it's tough, it's requiring patience, and yes, first doses are getting harder and harder to get in. We are still making progress.
Do we need more mandates?
No, we don't need more mandates. We need more support now to the communities, the health sectors that are really working their butts off at the moment to see if they can get out there and support those people. There's a point at which mandates are not going to gain us anything else. So at this point, we need support and respect, and to see if we can get a few more percentage, particularly in those communities where it's low.
And that is Dr. Nikki Turner. As debate surrounds how the Auckland border operates this summer, tourism operators that rely on them fear a death knell will sound if restrictions aren't lifted in time. At the moment, free travel between Auckland and the rest of the country relies on regions hitting their 90% vaccination targets. Some operators believe the government's set an unattainable goal. Katie Todd reports.
It's like skating on jelly, is how Yaron Yoyans describes running a tourism business amid the current alert level and travel restrictions. He estimates overseas visitors used to make up 50% of the people walking into Dive Tutukaka in Whangarei, and among the remainder, most were Aucklanders. Now he's trying to plan for the peak season, summer, when it's unclear if he'll be taking many people out on the water at all.
We earn our money nowadays for our business in December, January and halfway of February, because then everybody goes back to work and back to school, and then it's just weekends. So if we do not achieve the 90% everywhere, if Auckland does not open up for us, it will have a significant impact because most of our earnings will not be able to be earned.
Mr. Yoyans believes most of Northland's tourism businesses are facing the same bleak outlook.
My estimation is that if we do not open up until half or end of January, I would think 50% of the businesses in tourism businesses in Northland will probably cease to exist.
Take a trip to another summer hotspot south of Auckland's border, the Coromandel, and you'll hear the same message.
When we get to Boxing Day, the hope is that Aucklanders and Hamiltonians can come to the Coromandel. If that doesn't happen, we just simply won't make the reserves we need to get through the following winter.
That's Neil Opat, who runs Driving Creek Railway, a ziplining and scenic railway business that used to lure some 60,000 people a year. It's getting about a quarter of the usual numbers so far this month, and bookings for summer have plummeted.
You know, people have learnt now that it's not a good idea to book an Airbnb or whatever because, you know, there's a possibility it's going to be cancelled.
Yet Mr. Opat says the worst thing for tourism would be bouncing between alert levels. He supports any movement restrictions staying in place until it's certain that hospitals won't be overwhelmed. Ian Holroyd in Mount Maunganui takes a slightly different view. He runs chartered trips right around the country through his business classic tours, something that has turned into a logistical nightmare with 4 different alert levels to contend with. Mr. Holroyd thinks some regions aren't going to hit the 90% vaccination target this summer, and he thinks Aucklanders are becoming impatient.
Well, I think there'll be a revolt. I think people will just leave, and that may mean that the government may have to just fold their principle and say, OK, well, we haven't got there yet, but you need your Christmas, off you go.
The government has said it's committed to ensuring Aucklanders can leave the city for the summer holidays. One suggestion is that double vaccinated people and those who test negative for COVID-19 may be able to leave the region by Christmas. Any firm details are yet to be revealed and can't come fast enough for tourism operators.
Well, lots to talk about when it comes to the question, how long should we wait for people to get vaccinated and what should happen with Auckland's borders? And you guys have got a lot of opinions on it. So this listener says, the person who says the rest of New Zealand needs the energy from Auckland is dead wrong. The rest of us are just fine. We do not want Aucklanders to bring COVID to us. Megan says double vaxxed can still carry and spread COVID. Sorry, Auckland, but us Southerners would like to see a bit more done to keep us COVID free. Definitely double vaxxed, tested and potentially some self-isolation after arriving in the South Island, says Megan. Paul says, I get the thing about haircuts, business and dinners, but I just want to cross the border to see all my friends and family. I am so lonely, says Paul. Paul, we are here to keep you company. Text us any old time, 2101. Another person says absolutely everybody has had the chance or opportunity to get vaxxed. Fully open on the 1st of December, domestic, and fully open international the 1st of January, says Stephen. Another person agrees. December 1, make the country whole again and bulldoze the Auckland borders. But this one in, it's more likely I win lotto tomorrow night than either Auckland to level 1 by December 1st or New Zealand hitting 90%. And Roz says Auckland is travelling, even those double vaccinated can still transmit the virus. So is that the gift of Christmas, where Aucklanders give COVID to the rest of the country at Christmas so our hospitals can be overrun all summer? Thanks, Auckland, says Roz. 12 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoints on RNZ National. He muri aki ina pita kōrero. After the news at 6, we head to Stratford to talk to the mayor there after COVID turned up in the town's wastewater. A major sugar recall is hitting businesses big time, with those who ply their trade with sugar having to dump it in huge quantities. The recall is for Chelsea, Pam's and Woolworths brand raw and brown sugar products sold since October. It's over potential lead contamination, though MPI says the risk is very low. Jake McKee reports.
Deanna Yang's expecting to lose more than $50,000 to her cookie business, cancelling orders and binning stock, equating to thousands of cookies. She owns popular cookie store Moustache. The recall prompted her to close her Auckland and online stores abruptly this morning, and it's likely they'll remain that way until next week.
I am a bit concerned. Obviously, it's been tough for hospitality during COVID. This loss in sales is really going to impact us, so it's actually really devastating.
Most of the impacted sugar products are general consumer sized, between 500 grams and 4 kilograms, but it also includes the 25 kilogram bag of Chelsea soft brown sugar, something her business chews through.
So it's going to take us a really long time to recover from this.
Deanna Yang says her heart dropped when she found out about the recall and they're having to start from scratch. She only found out about it through a media report about 11 a.m, despite the advice being published last night.
In the past, we actually have had a recall for a little bit of chocolate, but we were called by MPI immediately and called by other suppliers that there was a recall. But for this, with Chelsea being such a big brand, I'm not sure why we have not been contacted, especially since the information was out yesterday.
New Zealand Sugar, which is Chelsea Sugar, wasn't available for an interview, but says it contacted New Zealand Food Safety as soon as a potential problem was identified. It doesn't yet know how much sugar will have to get thrown out, what that will cost, or if there will be brown and raw sugar shortages. It appears the contamination happened along the supply chain in a bulk ship delivery to New Zealand, the ship previously being used to transport other materials. Ministry for Primary Industries Deputy Director General Vincent Arbuckle says that's not good enough.
They're not happy with that either, so they'll be doing their investigation. What that does confirm is that it's an isolated event.
But he also says the lead levels are so low, it would only be a concern if someone consumed the contaminated product over a long period of time.
To be honest, I don't believe they should be worrying about symptoms at all. This is a precautionary thing. All producers monitor for lead and other contaminants in food on a very regular basis. If they identify anything, they move quickly.
Vincent Arbuckle says there are some environmental occurrences of lead, but it should never be detectable. Consumers are being told to return contaminated products for a refund, including Deanna Young, who has about 30 contaminated 25 kilogram bags on hand. A list of batch numbers of impacted products is available on the MPI website, with those batch numbers printed on the product packaging.
A derelict building in Christchurch caught fire for the second time in 3 years this morning, forcing some to evacuate their homes. The heritage-listed Antonio Hall has been left largely abandoned for the past decade. Our Otatahi reporter Kim Moody and visual journalist Nate McKinnon went to see what's left.
It was a 3:30 a.m. wake-up call for Marlene Hoods, with a firefighter outside her house telling her she had to get out.
They went on and on and on, banging my window, and I felt like saying, I'm not deaf, but then they let me go out, and I said, can I go in? And no, can't go back inside, so I hitched a ride with the next door neighbour.
Antonio Hall, a heritage-listed building built back in 1904 that has sat abandoned since the 2011 earthquakes, had gone up in flames again. Residents near the Riccarton Road building were evacuated and roads around the property were closed as firefighters worked to get the fire under control. Crews were still on site today, dampening down hotspots, but after suffering major damage in the 2011 earthquake, it wasn't safe for them to enter. Fire and Emergency Canterbury Area Commander David Berry says it was a busy morning.
It's what we call a third alarm, so we had about 11 appliances, about 50 people crew at one stage, and one turntable ladder. It was, well involved. I mean, it's a derelict building that's been around it's had a fire 2 years ago, and it's been sitting around, and we were more concerned about the exposures and the buildings or the residential properties around it. So we were covering those and extinguishing the fire at the same time.
The crumbling building has had a storage life. It's been a seminary, a private hostel for Canterbury University students, and a venue for hire. It's now privately owned and has sat largely derelict for the last 10 years. Local resident Tom Chalice says there has been the odd squatter.
I had some friends who used to go in there. Well, there used to be a group of people who were allowed on site for photo shoots and stuff like that, but apparently that's not happening anymore because it's not safe. So I guess it's just, either bring it back to its former glory or make a move. It's just another, stale eyesore in Christchurch that needs to be dealt with.
Heritage New Zealand's area manager for Canterbury and West Coast, Fiona Wykes, says it's a shame to see the building in such a state.
Really, really saddened and disappointed, to be honest, to see that this has happened again, and as you say, twice in 3 years as well. It's quite shocking and upsetting for us, of course. The building and grounds have always been a significant landmark on Riccarton Road in Christchurch, so it's quite a key site around that area.
The council issued a dangerous building notice after the 2019 fire saw almost a third of the mansion destroyed, but that was lifted after the owners completed work to bring the building back up to standard. Fiona Wykes says it's one of the largest privately owned houses in the city and has huge potential.
If you look at sort of nearby Dean's Bush and places like that, that gives you some idea of the sort of site it could have potentially been. And there have been various options over the years suggested, but sadly none of them have come to fruition. So I think really it's sort of disappointment has been the key element in recent years, I think, with just seeing it fall into greater disrepair. It's been really sad.
But Fire and Emergency's David Berry says more destruction is probably in its future.
Certainly don't want anybody around here or anything. It's pretty unstable with the walls. We'll be talking about demolishing the building, parts of the building to make safe before we leave.
Hamilton Zoo opened its gates again today after a month out of action. Waikato moved to Level 3, Step 2 on Wednesday, which means public facilities are back, but with social distancing and masks in place. Our reporter Louise Tanuth and camera operator Marika Habazi went to find out how that works at a zoo.
The gates are back open, the people allowed to return to see their favourite animals at Hamilton Zoo. But things look a bit different at the zoo now. Masks are mandatory and everyone needs to keep 2 metres distance, something that's hard to do when everyone wants a peep at the animals. But regardless, people are happy they can come back in after weeks in lockdown.
Been a long time stuck at home.
And is this one of your regular sort of activities?
Yeah, definitely. We're zoo passes members, so yeah.
And so were you the first ones in?
Yep, we were, weren't we, buddy?
Yeah.
What were you most excited about seeing first, Cole?
Seeing the rhinos.
The rhinos, yeah.
It's a big sigh of relief, being at home for so long and just getting out and seeing the animals, doing their own thing. It's a breath of fresh air. I'm so glad that the government has decided to do this.
At the start of the school holidays, we were already in level 3, so it's pretty cool to come back to the zoo and do something.
I reckon it's been really, really good because everyone's been closed in and locked in for so long. It's nice to be able to get out and see other whānaus out as well, walking around and with all their children.
Oh wow, look at them.
But the real question is, did the animals miss us after weeks spent with visits only from their keepers?
Did miss you guys. They did miss you guys. And we're so happy that you guys have come back, because even this morning we've seen the cheetah coming up and looking at people real close. We know the primates always love it when people come by.
That's Zoo Director Beards Fleming. He explains how they're managing things under the restrictions, now juggling visitors and animals again.
During lockdown, we've made sure that we've widened some paths and things like that to try to accommodate more space for people to spread out like we're asking them to. Once the car park fills up, we know that we've got a really nice number in the zoo. And as you can see, full car park doesn't mean full zoo.
Keepers aren't doing talks on the animals in level 3.2. Instead, people are encouraged to explore themselves. But the one thing they're grappling with is congregating at the different enclosures. When the animals come to say hello again, it's hard to resist. Cheetahs Radi, Bomani, Mani and Denzel have come to give their visitors a welcome back. So while most of the animals have missed us, it's animals like these leopard tortoises that really aren't that phased. Shane Fox is team leader of the carnivores. He's been coming in as usual over the last few weeks, but they split into teams. He says the deserted zoo has had its perks.
It means that we can change their day up completely. We can change their routine up. We're not having to work to a routine and actually just chill out with the animals. And it doesn't matter exactly where they are. So we can focus on building that positive relationship with them and focus on training, enrichment, things like that.
And while we've become more resilient in lockdown, the animals have too.
It's great for the animals. It means it gets them thinking and it gets them responding a lot more to, different situations instead of just knowing exactly what's going to happen throughout the day.
There are also some new faces here at the zoo. Several animals have been born over the last few weeks while the region's been in lockdown.
And you can check out that story from Marika and Louise on our RNZ site. I'm getting this distinct feeling that you South Islanders don't want a bar of us Aucklanders. This from DJ in Nelson. I hope most Aucklanders and Waikato folk would have the grace not to visit friends and distant relatives, nor book accommodation in the South Island this summer. It's time for Aucklanders in particular to think of others. One in the similar vein, the majority of people in the rest of New Zealand do not want the Auckland border open. Gary says Auckland must go to level 4 to reduce the spread and make people realise they abuse level 3 steps. There are consequences. Another person asked, I'm in Wellington, double vaxxed, want to visit Auckland. Am I allowed in? Good question.
RNZ News. Kia ora, I'm Marama Tipole. Auckland's Deputy Mayor says the city can't be held to ransom by people who refuse to be vaccinated. There's concern Auckland's hard border will still be in place over the summer, with only fully vaccinated people allowed to leave. Bill Cashmore has told Checkpoint that while it's sensible to get to a 90% double vaccination rate, the city needs to open up fairly soon regardless of the rate.
You've given as many people a chance as possible to get their vaccine. If someone's going to decide not to do it, you could wait till hell freezes over. They still won't get it done. So that's their choice. That's fine. We can't be held up waiting for everybody.
Bill Cashmore is giving it a 50-50 chance that Auckland will be in level 1 by the 1st of December. An ICU specialist says it's unlikely for someone with a mild case of COVID-19 to quickly deteriorate overnight. A second person with COVID-19 isolating at home has been found dead. A spokesperson for the Australia-New Zealand Intensive Care Society, Andrew Stapleton, says in a serious case of COVID-19, a person will usually get worse slowly over 4 or 5 days.
If you were well before you got COVID, it's not a disease like meningitis where you can be mildly unwell when you go to bed and not wake up at all the next morning.
Andrew Stapleton says there are some caveats on that advice, as COVID-19 can give people blood clots or cause cardiac arrest unexpectedly. Taranaki iwi are questioning why the Stratford community was not warned earlier about a strong positive COVID result from wastewater testing in the town. Health authorities were informed about the result last night from an ESR sample taken on Monday, but there was no official announcement until this morning. Warren Nichols from Ngā Ruahine Hauora was working at the pop-up testing station at the War Memorial Car Park.
For us, it's alarming. Been a strong result. Obviously, that's indicative of potentially some positive cases within our community. We want to make sure we are responding immediately to understand that better. It's only by testing that we will get a much clearer picture of how widespread that might be, if at all.
Warren Nichols says he's worried about local Māori who have the lowest vaccination rates in the region. Welfare centres in Gisborne will remain open until early this evening, offering help to people affected by flooding. The state of emergency in Taranaki has been lifted and heavy rain caused landslides and slips across the region. Engineers are inspecting properties and evacuating residents from dangerous homes. Welfare centres are operating at the Salvation Army and House of Breakthrough until 8 o'clock tonight. Te Poho o Rawiri Marae is on standby. Civil Defence says anyone who needs help should phone the council, which will link them up with the appropriate services. A Gisborne resident whose property in the coastal settlement of Sponge Bay was surrounded by floodwaters yesterday says the roads should have been closed much earlier. Lisa Walker-Daniels, who just moved to the area 3 months ago, says neighbours rallied to help with sandbagging.
Another neighbour got us sand and we were just filling up anything we could and going around each house and just dumping. We even were using black rubbish bags at some points and just filling everything we could. Road closures didn't happen until late in the afternoon after multiple phone calls. Nothing was happening. Neighbours were telling people to F off. You know, even people coming in and rubbernecking.
Lisa Walker-Daniels says while they were trying to put sandbags around their homes, the wake from speeding cars were washing over them. The joint head of MIQ says the facilities are not prisons and staff are not prison guards after 2 people tried to flee this week. Today, a COVID-positive community case ran to a waiting car after removing a section of fencing at Hamilton's Amohia MIQ. Yesterday, another community case made a run for it when their shuttle arrived at Auckland's Holiday Inn facility. Both abscondees were caught by police a few minutes later. Brigadier Rose King says it's hard to keep people in a facility if they're determined to leave. She says that there have been 186,000 people through managed isolation and quarantine, with 24 absconding. It's emerged the man accused of abducting 4-year-old Cleo Smith in Western Australia had a room full of dolls in his house. Terence Darryl Kelly has appeared in court charged with forcibly taking a child. Family and neighbours of 36-year-old say they've seen his image on a social media account that posts about loving children's dolls and claiming to have a partner and children despite living alone. Neighbours have described Mr. Kelly as reclusive, but says he's been behaving more socially in recent weeks. It's 6:05. The Black Caps coach Gary Stead says they're not looking past Namibia as they try to secure a semi-final spot at cricket's T20 World Cup. The New Zealanders are heavy favourites to get past Namibia tonight, but also need to beat Afghanistan on Sunday night to advance. Stead says Namibia need to be respected.
Any team can upset anyone, so we can't have an off day or a day where we just think we can relax and get into it. So it's nice in some ways that our destiny is in our own hands. We know what we have to do is we just have to keep winning cricket games.
The All Blacks coach Ian Foster is challenging his players to provide selection headaches going into the final 2 matches of their end-of-year tour. Sam Cane returns to lead the side against Italy on Sunday, ahead of games against Ireland and France. The lineup against Italy could be seen as second string, but Foster says he wants those picked to make selection decisions as difficult as possible. Michael Vink remains on track for a 3rd Tour of Southland cycling title. The Cantabrian finished safely in the peloton of today's 6th stage from Invercargill to Gore, won from the breakaway by James Fouché. An owner of Melbourne Cup winner Very Elegant has been fined $10,000 for breaching racecourse COVID protocols while celebrating Tuesday's victory. Melbourne businessman Bray Sokolski jumped the mounting yard fence to celebrate with jockey James McDonald. And the New Zealand golfer Lydia Ko is tied for the lead heading into tonight's 2nd round of the Ladies European Tour event in Saudi Arabia. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, composer John Pasathis selects a mixtape. It's a full cream edition of country life. Everything from putting the bulls out with the cows to sunscreen for cattle. Shapeshifter is this week's Friday Night Live act. And because it's Guy Fawkes night, we've got a sonic tonic dedicated to that thing you can't have a gunpowder plot without, fire, as Guy learnt the hard way. On nights of Meet Brian Crump after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
RNZ National funded through New Zealand On Air, looking at our short forecast from Met Service to midnight Saturday. The northern half of the North Island from Taumaranui and Taupo northwards, including Bay of Plenty, cloudy with scattered showers. Thunderstorms and heavy downpours for some areas this evening, both today and tomorrow, with a chance of hail for Northland today. For Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, periods of rain with possible heavy falls in Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, easing tomorrow evening. Taranaki and Taihape to Wellington, also Marlborough, often cloudy. A few showers mainly in the south and east. And for Nelson, cloudy periods. Isolated showers mainly inland this evening. For Canterbury, Otago and Southland, also Bulla, Westland and Fiordland. Fine apart from areas of evening cloud. However, cloud more persistent in North Canterbury with isolated showers there. And it's cloudy in the Chatham Islands. It's 8 minutes past 6.
Nā mihi marama, no mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint ko Lisa Owen tēnei. There are fears Delta's long tentacles have reached further across New Zealand with COVID-19 detected in wastewater in Taranaki. A sample taken in Stratford on Monday has come back with a strong positive result for the virus. Health officials are working to find out if COVID is spreading in the region or whether it could be a recently recovered case. Joining us now is Stratford Mayor Neil Volsky. Hi Neil.
Yeah, hi, how are you?
I'm well. Are you feeling a little nervous though?
Oh, I am feeling a little nervous, but I'm confident that we've got the processes in place to handle this, and we're working our way through the problem.
So this particular site where they've taken a wastewater test from, I mean, how many houses would feed into that?
Okay, well, it's one of it's our only sewage scheme actually, and it services just the township of Stratford. So the population here is around about 6,000 people, and it's only the Stratford township that supplies the sewage ponds where the test was taken.
Right. So in terms of testing, Neil, it's not inconceivable that you could actually test the whole town if need be.
Well, effectively that is. It is testing the sewage from the whole of the town. But
in terms of the COVID tests and the fact that they want people to turn out and get a test, right, so they know if there's any spread in the community, with a town of your size, it would be possible over a number of days to get everyone a test if they turned up.
Well, I guess that's true, but the reality is that we've been asking people to come forward if they have symptoms or are unwell or flu-like symptoms to come forward and be tested. And the response today, there's been about 200 in the Stratford Township today.
Right. And what about vaccination rates in your area?
It's been well publicised that Taranaki as a region has been one of the lowest. And within the region itself, we're not at the top of the pile, if you like, but around about 83, 84% first dose and around 65 second dose. So not too bad, but there's a long way to go on those second doses.
Yeah, why do you think that is the case?
I guess there's a lot of reasons, but as much as anything, I put it down to just straight out apathy. The region has been COVID-free really for quite some time, and I don't think it's really struck home to people that this could happen right here on your doorstep, and now it has. I'm sure there'll be a change of attitude and we'll get a bigger uptake of vaccination.
Are you comfortable sitting at level 2 with this question mark hanging over where the positive test has come from?
I'm not sure that the alert levels have been altered at this stage. There hasn't been a reason to, as far as the health authorities are concerned. They will look at that and they'll take all the information into account before they make a decision. But we've got another test underway that's been done today, and the results of that will be known Sunday. And I guess that'll give us a confirmation or otherwise that the first test was accurate. and then that's the point where we'll need to make a decision at some point there.
Neil, have they given you an indication of what could happen if that second test confirms that this is actually a positive?
No, they haven't, but that will be part of the process. We'll find that out on Sunday. But in the meantime, the number of people who have been tested and those who have come along that have been feeling unwell, it may well turn up a test there as a positive test as well. So there's two forums in which we can look at this.
Really appreciate your time, Neil. That's Neil Volsky, who's the Mayor of Stratford there. Positive wastewater test. As he says, they're taking another test and should get the results back by the end of the weekend. A Dunedin man who brutally murdered a couple before setting their home alight to hide his crimes has been sentenced to life imprisonment. Wiramu Namana appeared in the High Court in Dunedin this afternoon, where he was jailed for at least 17 years for the murders of Anastasia Neve and David Clark in 2018. Timothy Brown was in court.
Krista Neve, one of Anastasia Neve's 4 younger sisters, told the court about the devastating effect her sister's murder has had on her life.
The traumatic way in which my sister passed still affects me now, but it is more sadness for her and her life and the things that she didn't get to do. She didn't deserve to die, and she certainly didn't deserve to die the way she did. We go through life thinking that these things will never happen to us or people we know, but when they do, it changes you, and it changes your family in ways that can't be put into words, and it's not just temporary. It changes things forever.
Krista told the court finding out her sister had died was devastating, but later learning she had been murdered further compounded her pain.
I can't remember where I was or when I found out that my sister was murdered, but I remember the feeling. It was terror. I was terrified, and the thoughts that started invading my brain were haunting. These thoughts continued for months. I have dreamt about the many ways in which she could have suffered before her final breath.
Wiramu Namana had an addiction to intravenous drugs, and that dependency was growing in January 2018. Namana was hanging out for drugs and contacted David Clark, who he sometimes sourced small amounts of drugs from, on January the 21st, 2018. Justice Nation says Mr Clark sourced a small amount of morphine and didn't tell Namana. Agitated, he called an associate at 10:19 p.m.
You were breathing heavily and sounded annoyed. You asked the associate where the victims were and said they were not answering knocks on their door. You told the associate you felt like kicking the door in. At some point after that, you entered their home, flew into a rage and attacked them using a knife, cricket bat and mini sledgehammer as weapons. You killed both of them.
Namana returned to the address early the next morning and set fire to the flat. An elderly man with a disability lived in the rear flat of the address and was lucky to escape the blaze. Justice Nation says Namana is a high risk of further violent offending.
I took into account the way you set fire to your victims' bodies in deciding that these murders had been committed with a high level of callousness. But you also set fire to the building in a way that led to its complete destruction and significantly put the person in the adjoining property in a situation of extreme danger. There was premeditation in your deciding to return to the property.
Prosecutor Craig Power told the court a feature of Namana's offending was its brutality and callousness.
The Crown submits here that this was a brutal and savage attack to both victims. The use of those weapons caused a significant number of injuries, a significant number of stab wounds. Really, it's submitted here by the Crown. There was a high level of brutality and callousness.
Namana's lawyer, Judith Ablett-Kerr QC, told the court her client was remorseful for his offending, as the victims were his friends. She says Namana's life of abuse and neglect offers an insight into the man he's become. Justice Nation sentenced Namana to life imprisonment for the murders and a concurrent sentence of 2 years for the arson. He will not be eligible for parole until 2035.
It's 17 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoints on RNZ National. Migrants are selling their belongings, begging for money and living in garages after losing their jobs during lockdown. The Migrant Action Trust says hundreds of foreign workers and international students are desperate for help until they can work again and while they wait on visas. Jill Bonnet reports.
Tarry and her husband have a 2-month-old baby, but while they wait for a visa to come through, he cannot work and she can't claim maternity leave.
I'm selling all my stuff in Facebook Market, so I have money to buy my baby diaper and formula. And then I asked the food bank donation. This is not supposed to be happening because my husband has a good pay and me, we are both working. We are not lazy. I can't believe it, actually.
They also have a 15-year-old daughter who has gone through her entire schooling here after arriving from the Philippines in 2010, aged 3.
I said to my daughter, you know, Daddy and I, we did our best. You saw Daddy study hard while working. And you know, I'm working as well, hard, not like easy job. But it didn't work. I'm really sorry.
She says her husband's job as an electrical engineer is still open and the company needs him back. She's embarrassed to be begging for food and money to tide them over. Until August the 31st, migrants could claim an emergency benefit, but since then they can only turn to food banks and other charities. Migrant Action Trust manager Amy Marga says there's much hidden misery like Tarry's.
It's a mix of people who can't work during lockdown and then people facing immigration delays in the processing. So it's really unfortunate that the emergency benefits was last August, just when the migrants needed it most. It's really a hard time for them. Some are now living in garage.
Last year, local civil defence handed out rations to migrants and later a government and Red Cross scheme helped 11,000 people. Aaron has been here more than 6 years, but has just spent 3 months without an income while he waited for a visa.
I don't have any money. The community trust people, they are helping with the groceries and kind of some sort of bill payments.
He says the trust told him that money has run out. Social Development Minister Carmel Sepuloni says community groups are getting funding to help.
If there were organisations or are organisations that are providing support to our ethnic communities in the form of hardship support of this nature and not getting supported to do so, then I certainly would want to know who they were.
She says the emergency benefit was a temporary bridge for stranded migrants, such as seasonal Pacific workers. Aaron got good news this week. His visa was approved and he can start his new job as a manager. Not so lucky are 1,200 people whose work visa applications were also filled out before lockdown and who are still waiting for an answer. Immigration New Zealand said in a statement it streamlined the process for renewing essential skills visas. It said it's prioritising online visas and most staff are working remotely, but delays are expected.
It's emerged the man accused of abducting 4-year-old Cleo Smith in Western Australia had a room full of dolls in his house. Terence Darryl Kelly has appeared in court charged with forcibly taking a child. Family and neighbours of the man say his image appears on a social media account that posts about loving children's dolls and claiming to have a partner and children despite living alone. World Watch's Paulina Lau has more.
What's your name, sweetheart?
My name is Cleo.
Your name is Cleo.
Hello,
Cleo.
This was the moment the case of a missing 4-year-old had a happy ending when Cleo Smith was found, the end of an 18-day search. Police raided a locked property in the small Western Australian town of Carnarvon and found Cleo in a bedroom. Now, more information is emerging about the 36-year-old suspected abductor. Family and neighbours of the man say his image appears on a social media account which posts about loving children's dolls. It also claims he has a partner and children despite living alone. The account has photos of him and posts about loving Bratz dolls and includes one video of him in a room of shelves filled with dolls. His face in the video has a filter giving him larger eyes and heart emojis. Residents and family members told the ABC the man lives alone. According to his first cousin, Mr. Kelly was raised in Carnarvon by his grandmother, who died about 3 years ago. His cousin says he's a quiet person who would usually stick to himself. Meanwhile, police have been interviewing Cleo about what happened, saying it will take them days to get the details they need. Terence Kelly appeared in court today barefoot and wearing a black T-shirt. He shouted, "I'm coming for you," at media covering the hearing. He didn't apply for bail and wasn't asked to enter a plea. He's expected to appear in court again next month.
The UK has become the first country in the world to approve an antiviral pill that's been described as a game changer in the fight against COVID. The tablet molnupiravir will be used for vulnerable patients recently diagnosed with the virus. The BBC's Fergus Walsh has more.
A pill that can stop COVID in its tracks. It's been the goal of scientists since the pandemic began. Now there is molnupiravir, and it's likely to be the first of many antiviral treatments. Anne-Marie tested positive for coronavirus on Tuesday and has just started a 5-day course of molnupiravir as part of a trial in Liverpool. She's had cancer and so is more vulnerable to COVID.
It's absolutely a life and death situation. I do have a family that I need to think about and I need to be here for them. And if this gives me the opportunity to be around for my son's wedding and everything else, then so be it.
When coronavirus infects cells, it makes multiple copies of itself. Molnupiravir, originally designed to treat flu, introduces errors in the virus's genetic code, which hampers its ability to spread.
It's probably 11:15 for the first patient.
It's over a year since the clinical research facility at Royal Liverpool University Hospital began testing molnupiravir on patients. Global trials have shown it halves the chances of dying or being hospitalised with COVID.
To have a drug like this, to have an antiviral that's potent, that's able to be taken orally, is a very important moment and does mark a milestone in our discovery of effective medicines against COVID.
The UK has ordered 480,000 courses of molnupiravir, with the first doses expected to arrive here later this month. It's been approved for people with at least one risk factor for COVID, such as being over 60, obese, or having heart disease. It's most effective when given within 5 days of symptoms appearing. The cost of the drug hasn't been revealed, but in the US, it's £500 per patient.
World leaders are being urged to respond with meaning to global warming after another European summer of intense heat waves and forest fires. Greece has had thousands of wildfires in recent months, fanned by its worst heat wave in decades. The government said it did everything it could to stop the fires, but they were too intense for their defences. The BBC's Bethany Bell reports.
Because there is all over fires, all over. Here, there, up there, in the other mountain, oh my God.
Lieutenant Colonel Stratos Anastasopoulos is responsible for coordinating firefighting aircraft across Greece. From his helicopter, we look down at the burnt forests of northern Evia, hillside after hillside of dead trees, black and stark. Over a third of the island's territory was destroyed.
What made it so intense this year?
It was very, very dry, the grasses and the grass and the trees.
Is this climate change?
Yes.
Back on the ground, Stratos told me that this year's mega fires in Greece were unprecedented. He blames the extended heat wave and very little rain.
I'm a firefighter for 23 years, and as I can remember, there is no similar situation. It's a global problem.
This village was right in the heart of the fire zone. And the hills round about, the trees are blackened and dead. People are working to clear the dead trees, and everywhere you can see logs chopped up for firewood this winter. But there's so many more trees that need to come down. Teams of lumberjacks fell trees to make protective terraces to prevent landslides. With the forest burnt, there's a real danger of erosion and flooding when the rains come this winter.
Here we are in the... Yeah. We are here.
Okay. Ilias Tsiritis, who works for the World Wildlife Fund, says megafires will happen again and again unless there's more focus on prevention.
In breaking news, COVID-19 has been detected in the wastewater in Gisborne. Gisborne Mayor Rihet Stoltz joins me now. Hi, what can you tell us about this latest development?
Kia ora, Lisa. Yes, so we've been alerted that we have had 2 positive wastewater samples on the 1st of November and the 3rd of November. I just want to make it clear we have no confirmed cases of COVID in Taranaki or in Gisborne at this stage. It can be people that have returned from MIQ that could be shedding into the wastewater system. So I just want to make it clear, even though we've received positive wastewater tests, we have no confirmed cases as of yet.
Okay, we've only got a few moments. So I'm just wondering, do you know what areas that wastewater was flowing from? What neighbourhoods?
No, Lisa, so at this stage, this will just be covering Gisborne City. We've got no idea what neighbourhoods. We haven't received any detail like that. All we're asking people, if you have symptoms, get tested as soon as possible. We've got designated spaces tomorrow morning where you can go and also get vaccinated as soon as possible.
Rihet, this is slightly complicated, isn't it? Because you're not having the best of times with having had an emergency with the floods. Are you hoping that that's not going to stop people coming out?
No, Lisa. So at 4 o'clock, just as I signed our declaration to stop our emergency declaration, my phone rang from the Ministry of Health. So we've just stepped from one emergency into the other. But you know what? Team Tairāwhiti, we can do this.
So you are urging people, despite obviously there's a bit of water still sloshing around on the ground, and I understand the rain is still coming, get in the car and go get a test.
Absolutely. If you have flu-like symptoms, please, we will make it very clear on the Health Board Facebook page, council everywhere, where you can get tested tomorrow, only if you have symptoms, so that we can see if this is circulating in our community or not, and also get vaccinated.
Really appreciate your time this evening. Best of luck over the weekend. That is the Gisborne Mayor Rihet Stoltz there. If you are just joining us, in breaking news, COVID-19 has been detected in the wastewater in Gisborne. And as the Mayor was saying there, if people have symptoms, please go out and get tested tomorrow. Gisborne has, until a few hours ago, been under a state of emergency with some severe flooding and concerns around slips. They're still asking people, if they have symptoms, please get tested. They want to know if there is undetected community transmission there. Thank you for joining us today and all your feedback. Heaps of it on the Auckland border. Some really strong feelings about whether we should be allowed to travel. South Islanders, well, not so keen on us at this point, it seems. Do have a wonderful weekend. Our news team will keep you up to date and we'll catch you again on Monday. Same place, same time.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. COVID-19 has turned up in 2 wastewater samples in Gisborne. Taranaki iwi are questioning why the Stratford community was not warned earlier about a strong positive COVID result from wastewater testing in the town. Auckland's Deputy Mayor says the city can't be held to ransom by people who refuse to be vaccinated. Tourism operators on either side of Auckland's border fear they'll fold if travel restrictions aren't lifted by Christmas. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
The local Suburbs team did an exceptional job, so it was great to be here in my home patch and whilst the water was right up on my doorstep.
Lately with me, Karen Hay, is your late night eye on the latest headlines and the people who are making them.
Well, any other ideas as to how you can utilise the end-of-use tyres for a suitable new product is worthy of consideration. Remember those swans that people used to make?
They could make a comeback, I reckon. Up to date if you're up late. Lately with Karen Hay every weeknight from 10 on RNZ National.
Kia ora, Karen, and I'm Brian Crump, getting ready for another night on RNZ National, although I dare say that Karen will have an update on the situation in Tairāwhiti, Gisborne, going from flooding to possible, I stress possible, COVID in the community with those positive wastewater tests, whether that's from people coming out of MIQ who are shedding the virus or from a case in the community. We'll have to wait and see. But I expect that the Lately team will be checking in on Gisborne tonight. I'm getting ready for another edition of Nights, which commences after the news at 7. Because of the date, we have a Sonic Tonic dedicated to fire and a sneak preview of the 7:07pm question, what's lighting yours? You can start the texting discussion 2101, email nights@rnz.co.nz or leave a comment on the Facebook page, Nights and RNZ National. In this half hour, later on, there's an interview that's been getting a lot of hits on the website with a academic, Dr. Cherie Lacey from Victoria University, and how not to get sucked into dark patterns on websites. What are dark patterns? Well, basically it's a way of just tricking you into spending more time on a website, especially one where you have to buy stuff or you can buy stuff, so you stay there longer and you spend more money than maybe you had initially planned to do. That's coming up later on. First off, it's Focus on Politics tonight. What do you think the topic might be? I'm sure you've guessed it already.
Kia ora, welcome to Focus on Politics. I'm Jane Patterson. New Zealand will soon be moving into new territory, abandoning the reliance on lockdowns and shifting to the COVID-19 protection framework, or the traffic light system. The impending transition could make or break this government.
I think probably one of the most difficult periods that we will encounter is right now, where we have Auckland, who we've rightly wanted to give the ability to flip first. But for the rest of the country, so long as we're sitting under 90%, we have to make individual judgment calls on how we deal with cases when they emerge in those areas.
And what does this mean for life in Aotearoa, for case numbers, hospitalisations, and the number of deaths that may result?
Delta has made it very hard to maintain our elimination strategy. Its tentacles have reached into our communities and made it hard to shake, even using the best public health measures and the toughest restrictions we had available to us. But right as our long-standing strategy was challenged, we also had a new tool, one that means as COVID has changed, we could change too. And rather than being locked down, we could move forward safely and with confidence. That tool is the vaccine.